Hi, everybody. This is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. It is Friday, May 3rd today, and I'm doing a video to talk about the new moon in Taurus, which is coming through tomorrow. I'm also taking an opportunity to talk about the meaning of the sun in Taurus, which is something that I have fallen a little behind on doing. I usually like to talk about the meaning of the sun in each of the signs closer to the ingress of the sun into a new sign, but things have been pretty busy for me lately. But better now than never. So we're going to talk about a few things. One is that anytime there's a new moon right now in Taurus, it's sort of a big deal because it's not your typical Taurus new moon. Anytime there's a full moon in Taurus, it's not your typical Taurus situation. This is going to apply for a while now because the planet Uranus has recently ingressed into the sign of Taurus. So that's one of the main points that I want to talk about today. A few other things on my list of things to talk about includes the fact that this new moon, it's happening as a couple of other very important planetary aspects are occurring. So we want to talk about those as well and try to, catch up on everything the best that we can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the chart on the screen so that you can all see it. All right, there we go. So a couple of things that I'd like to point out right away. The moon is culminating in Aries right now as I speak on Friday afternoon. But what we really want to look at is the entrance of the moon into Taurus, which is happening in the next hour or so. Here, at least on the East Coast, it's around 5 o'clock. And then what happens is the moon, in the first couple of hours, the moon is going to move into a conjunction with Uranus. So this is a powerful moment because we're technically in a balsamic dark moon right now. And leading into that new moon that's coming tomorrow is a conjunction with Uranus. Anything that happens really closely within the hours, day, maybe day of, day before, day after a new moon or a full moon will usually tone the new moon, or in this case, the entire moon cycle to come. This is something I had the chance to talk about recently with a colleague of mine. He was mentioning how important aspects are happening around the new moon. And I said, yeah. He kind of was asking, kind of stating his opinion that aspects happening around the new moon really matter. And I was really agreeing with him, saying, yeah, so this is a general observation that anyone can benefit from. When you're looking at a new moon, look and see what aspects are occurring or near perfecting, especially those that are applying and about to occur. The reason for this is that the new moon is capturing a moment in time. And it's just like, like let's say that at the outset of your day, right? You've had that, you hear that saying, I got out of bed out on the wrong side of the bed this morning. You've heard that before. It's like saying the way that the thing started has been indicative of the way that the thing has gone. This is common knowledge. This is, sometimes people speak about such things superstitiously, or like that might be a sarcastic joke that somebody's telling, but actually there's truth to it. The way that we start things is like a seed in time, karmically speaking. This is why it matters to do things right when you're starting things, to take the time to start things on the right foot. This is why people hire astrologers to figure out the right time to start a business or whatever else. So similarly, at the time of a new moon, whatever is happening matters. Well, here we have a new moon with unpredictable, erratic Uranus and the dark moon phase. What this can indicate, remember that Uranus is generally a destabilizing planet, a planet that often involves a little shock and awe, a little bit of the unpredictable. It has the effect often of awakening or stimulating revolution and change and breaking out of old paradigms, all of which can be good. But under a dark moon, this would typically mean that in the deepest process of letting go of something or of changing something, of something needing to change, especially in Taurus, a fixed sign that sometimes really has trouble with change. Not always, I don't want to be too stereotypical here, but fixed signs in general, like Taurus, can sometimes struggle to make a change. They can be more about holding with something in the way that it is, which can be an asset, a strength as well. You know, I want the people I employ, for example, to be on time. If I'm going to hire someone to do something at my house or something like that, I want them to show up at the time they say they're going to show up, because I have to get childcare or something like that. So this fixed signs can be stable and reliable, but sometimes hard to change, hard to move. This is why they were originally called solid signs. So you think about Moon Uranus, and you're thinking about somewhat erratic, destabilizing conditions in an area that tends to be fixed, and that's toning. And it's, remember, this is a deconstructive or disintegrating process under the dark moon. Think about the deepest part of something really falling away before the new seed can really take hold. So the ground is being prepared, but as it's being prepared right now, it's happening with a little blast from Moon Uranus. And the moon, frankly, is not entirely comfortable with Uranus, because the moon tends toward homeostasis, and or at the very least, another way of thinking about it is the moon likes for there to be familiar patterns. The moon likes what is familiar. And the moon is also like the biomatrix, the way that everything is delicately woven together. The moon is like a web weaver. So you think about Uranus and the moon getting together, and you think about something that could be a little bit more rattling or shaking, and that's not always easy. It can be a little, so that's coming as the new moon is coming. That's the first thing to think about. Now you can look at the whole sign house of Taurus in your birth chart to get a sense for where both some degree of destabilization, possibly breakthrough or innovation as well, is occurring, and where the focus will be in terms of really turning the page and starting a new chapter, which is what new moons are all about, a new beginning. So check the whole sign house of Taurus in your birth chart. If it's in the second house, it might involve finances. If it's in the 10th house, maybe career. 7th house, love and relationships. 5th house, your children. 4th house, your home or your property. And it goes like that, So look at that and see what's possible. And oftentimes you already have a sense of where this is going. It shouldn't be a complete surprise. Uranus may have a few tricks up its sleeve, but it shouldn't be a complete surprise. You should have some sense of what's coming. So for example, I have, I'm a Taurus rising, right? So this is my first house. And so new beginnings, very strong new beginnings. And where's the ruler of Taurus in my chart? Venus. It's in the 4th house, right? So we're doing some, in the next month, we're planning on doing some projects around the house. We just had the roof replaced, or probably have to get the furnace replaced. It's an old house we bought years ago. We've been meaning to do some repairs. So there's some work that's probably being done around my house. So you get that newness, Taurus, 1st house, a place of new beginnings, combined with the 4th house, which is home, family, roots. I would not be surprised for there to be some erratic situations coming up around home or family this month either, with Uranus in the mix right now. So whatever Uranus is touching in your chart right now in Taurus by whole sign house, the other way of looking at it is that Uranus is also in a relationship with wherever Venus is in your chart. Wherever Venus is, Uranus can't help but have a relationship, because that's Uranus's host. So anytime I'm looking at Uranus in the next 7 years, it's always going to be related to Venus in my 4th house in Leo, which is my ascendant ruler. So that's just, an example from my own chart, but you can play with this in your chart too and see where Venus is at. So, all right. So that's kind of the first thing. Now, the second piece that is really important here is looking at where Venus is in the sky right now. And you can see, for example, that Venus is in Aries. And early on in this moon cycle, Venus in Aries is going to head through squares to Saturn, the south node, and Pluto in Capricorn, while also making a trine to Jupiter in Sagittarius and moving closer towards a sextile with Mars in Gemini. So Venus is debilitated in Aries right now in Mars's sign. Mars, Mercury are really empowered in a mutual reception with each other right now. So that's one thing that's happening early on. Whatever Uranus is doing with this new moon cycle, in the beginning, it's going to involve some conflict or turbulence around Venus-related things. What does that mean? Venus-related things are going to be love, relationships, harmony, beauty, aesthetics, cleanliness or health, also ruled by Venus. Cleanliness in general and any kinds of hygiene issues that could lead to disease, like infectious diseases that are caused by lack of, like lack of being clean or good hygiene. Those would be Venus-related sicknesses. But Venus generally related to cleanliness and also to love and to beauty and harmony, to peaceful places. So the peaceful scene that Venus represents could be challenged a little bit in the beginning, and that's part of this kind of erratic. This isn't just a new moon in Taurus. It's like let's go for a stroll down a country lane. It's like would probably be the best version of Taurus for a lot of us, right? But this is a new moon cycle in Taurus that is dealing with a kind of a more of a bloodthirsty Venus in the sign of the warrior right now, where she's a little less comfortable. Now, later in the cycle, closer to the time of the full moon, Venus will, halfway through the month or so, I think it's the 15th or 16th, something like that, Venus will pop into Taurus and then be in her rulership, and the whole thing will shift. But the first half of the month, we're looking at more, challenging issues in relationships, probably severe, rigid kinds of energy, anger, frustration, limitation. This is more drastic. However, Venus is getting into a trine with Jupiter, and so there is abundance. There are going to be some blessings, some good news, some help, some aid, some resources. All will be okay, I think, because the culmination of this process, around the 7th and 8th, for example, Venus will get through the square with Pluto, which can be very heavy and transformative and kind of, a lot of deeper healing work in relationships, a lot more explosive dynamic purging, upheavals around women and relationships and love and all of that, right? But then it hits Jupiter at the same time by trine, and that should bring in a feeling of abundance, where Venus should be feeling confident in receiving some aid or support to work through some kind of upheaval. So, and then, Venus is getting along with Mars and Gemini right now. So a lot of this is mental, a lot of it's verbal. You got to be careful of getting really aggravated mentally or verbally during the beginning of the cycle. But this relates back to what is Taurus all about? What does a new moon in Taurus really want from all of this? And the answer to that is usually greater peace, simplicity, sensuality, stability, like that. Those are some of the main goals of Taurus. But don't underestimate Taurus. I'm going to talk more about Taurus and the meaning of the sun in Taurus in a little bit. But Taurus is a very ambitious sign. It's not, a lot of people think of it as just a very passive sign, and it's not passive because it's on the yang half of the year in the middle of spring, bull rushing toward the height of yang power. Don't forget, I've said this before, but people like Hitler, had a lot of planets in Taurus. In the worst sense, Taurus is like a bull market in that it has a bull rushing lust for power, for materiality. It can be very greedy and possessive. So you have to be careful of the bullish, the sort of bullish mentality that's possible right now. The desire for peace, comfort, simplicity, greater sense of control or beauty or sensuality, sense of security, all of that. In the beginning here, it might come through some kind of breakdown where there's a feeling of being in a power struggle, trying to get the peace that you want, demanding it, or trying to, more conflicts and struggles in relationships. I think things will come out okay. But at any rate, that's the new moon. And then the other thing happening under the new moon, which is also really interesting, is you've got a Mars-Jupiter opposition. And that is also really interesting because your Mars-Jupiter oppositions are like, they're very, like I think of like the Three Musketeers, or, like Robin Hood, or just like sort of classic sort of rebel heroes. Mars in Gemini is very provocative, kind of trickster, intelligent, incisive, sometimes very sharp-tongued, but often very funny and youthful, and charming. And it's opposite Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is, you know, sort of more like a really refined and passionate, you know, sage or professor or something like that. So you put the two together and you get this kind of, you know, the feeling of intellectual strength, but also possibly and kind of a rebellious and in a rebellious way too. But it's a demonstration of the power of the mind on display right now on a certain level, with Mercury's sign and Jupiter's sign being featured, Sagittarius and Gemini. But that dynamic can be also, it can be about kind of going to battle, going to war. Like it has that feeling of like, I'll fight for what I believe in. I have a mission. I have a cause. It's like I'm carrying the banner into battle. It also has the feeling of like the king riding into battle, like the king himself sort of going into battle. Or, you know, you could even say that it has the feeling of there being some really what do I want to say? Like like an action hero movie, you know, like all of these Marvel, whatever, the comic book movies that are really popular. Like Mars Jupiter has that feeling of like Captain America. It's like, you know, here's the god of war being amplified by Zeus. Just it makes it all kind of big and grandiose. So you got, you know, it's kind of valiant and courageous, but sometimes sort of foolhardy and you know, kind of, you know, a foolish bravado or machismo. So you got to be on display for those things. But when you see that coming in at the time of the new moon, at the same time that Venus is going through all of this stuff, you know, the thing that I'm reminded of is, this is kind of a funny example, but when I was a kid, for example, you know, I have memories of being on family vacations. And, you know, when someone gets really bullish about wanting to have a nice, peaceful, quiet time, you know, someone will be like, look, you know, someone, a parent loses their shit at some point during the nice family vacation, you know, and they're like, we are here to have a nice goddamn time, you know, you know, like I have memories of my dad or like someone, you know, in my family, like an uncle or someone just like being like militant about trying to have some kind of really nice, good, peaceful, you know, well put together experience. So Taurus new moon has the desire for that kind of, Taurus new moon has the desire to have that kind of nice Edenic, you know, it's like, it's going to be really nice. It's going to be like a nice picnic on the 4th of July. So peace, control, sensuality, a sort of abundance or richness in an earthy sense. And in the background, it's like all the other planets are, you know, in the middle of some kind of, you know, well, to use, you know, on TV right now, what's happening, there's like all these epic Game of Thrones battles happening. So it's like there's this, it's like in the backdrop of what otherwise looks like a very Taurian sort of Venusian intention for the new moon. There's all of this swashbuckling going on, and there's this kind of, so I think the progress towards something peaceful, stable, luxurious, grounded, sensual, all the kind of Taurian desires of the new moon are happening at least during the first half of the moon cycle. It's the next week, in the backdrop of some real sword fighting, right? And some more contractive, heavier moments in relationships, especially around ideologies, beliefs, ideas, and how they're going to shape the peaceful future that everyone wants. We're here to have a good time. Damn it. I'm actually reminded of, what are they called? National Lampoon's vacation movies. You remember Clark Griswold? He always has like the idealistic idea of how it's going to go, like chopping down a Christmas tree or going to the theme park or like whatever the family's going to do. It always ends up just a total shit show. Excuse my language today. But anyway, you get the idea. So I have a feeling that some of that's going to be going on in the background a little bit during the first half of the moon cycle. So at any rate, that's kind of what I'm looking at in terms of the new moon and the first week of the new moon. So thinking about how to set an intention for this new moon, which I think is always it's not a bad idea, just as long as the intention isn't ridiculously self-centered, because sometimes it feels like you can't talk about an intention in this new age world of astrology without people looping it into complete nonsense. Like, well, this month I'm going to become the world's most famous spiritual entrepreneur, or whatever the case might be. I'm going to launch a webinar about how to be your life coach, and it's going to get 1,000 people. So setting an intention, a good modest intention right now, you're thinking about things that can provide for greater simplicity. One thing that Stephen Forrest says that I really like is that Taurus is sort of the sign that has a lot to do with the peace and natural simplicity of the animal body. I really like that. It's an earth sign that is all about harmony with the Venus rulership. Be careful of the secret bloodlust that is a part of Taurus. That's what I want to say, is think about contentment, simplicity, beauty. The truth of the matter is that the way that our nervous system works, we do better usually with fewer things satisfying us. But the truth is that if we can learn how to really feel happiness from taking a walk, from drinking a glass of water, from doing very simple things when it's the right time to do very simple things, usually happiness is like a taste that you have to develop, in my opinion. I don't think it can be done without spiritual practices, but in terms of simple everyday advice for seeking happiness in a very simple kind of Taurian way, I think we refine and develop our taste for happiness by learning how to appreciate simpler things, learning how to appreciate that the sun is out, not overlooking that, really just taking a moment to be there. Slowing the pace of our life is usually necessary in order to feel simpler states of happiness. But simpler states of happiness do not mean less happiness. Just like, for example, when you're really deeply intimate with someone, just a touch of their hand to your hand at the right moment can feel so deeply personal and intimate, right? So similarly, small things, natural things, can be very powerful. With a new moon in Taurus, we can reclaim, it can be radical with Uranus in Taurus to reclaim some degree of sensual, simple intimacy in life with the world around us, with ourselves. Now let's talk a little bit about the meaning of the sun in Taurus. So remember that I like to define the meaning of the signs in terms of the astronomy behind the time of year, right? So when you think about, for example, Taurus season, you're thinking about a time of year where the sun is moving very gradually toward the summer solstice. So the summer solstice is a time of year when the sun is at its maximum, its peak. It's the longest day of the year, the most sunlight in a 24-hour period. So from Aries all the way up to that moment, we are on the yang of the yang half of the year. That means we're in the 6 months of the year where the light is rising, or the light is more, there is more light in a 24-hour period than there is darkness. For the 6 months of the year, from Aries to the fall equinox in Libra, it's like April to September, we are in the light half of the year. From Aries all the way to 0 Cancer, we're on the light half of the year, and we're on the half of the year where the light is not only more than there is darkness, but it's building and growing more and more and more every day. So it's the yang of the yang. Whereas from Cancer down to Virgo, down to Libra, I should say, that half of the solar, the yang, is the yin of the yang, insofar as we're starting to darken. The light is lessening, even though there's more light in a 24-hour period during the summer. The light is coming down from the tower of the summer solstice, so to speak. It's walking down towards the south every day. So when you look at Taurus, even though it's a feminine sign, quote unquote, or a yin sign, even though it's the exaltation of the moon and it's the home of Venus, and it has that really feminine, earthy, kind of sensual feeling to it, people will mistake that for Taurus being passive or more inert. So people will say like, oh, lazy Tauruses, or oh, stubborn Tauruses, or oh, stuck Tauruses. Those are some of the criticisms, right? As well as, they like beauty, and they like, all the stuff that I've been talking about in this new moon talk here. They like simplicity, or the animal body, or comforting things, or whatever. But it's also very important to remember that the bull is a part of the progression towards the maximal amount of light. That means it's ascensional in nature. The sign is a part of the archetypal part of the ascent towards the highest light. So Taurus is actually incredibly idealistic. Now, I want to read you something. I almost forgot. Hold on. This is something I had this on in my mental to-do list earlier when I was writing this talk today, and then I just almost forgot about it. This is an essay from James Hillman called "Imagination is Bull," and here's what this is what I want to impress upon everybody. So there is sometimes in the earth sign of Taurus, we fall in love with imaginal pictures of nature, right? Like bare feet on the sunshine and trickling fountains of water in the woods. And, like we imagine like some kind of, like an anthropology ad for women or something where, it's like, it's all natural earth tones and everyone's just beautiful wearing starry, flower crowns. So this is not entirely true. And it misses the really idealistic, aspirational, ascensional quality of the springtime, which accompanies the bull. So I want to get back to it again. If I can find this passage, this is what James Hillman had to say about the bull. A lot of it. All right. Okay. I'm actually going to pause this just for a second so I can find the spot. Okay, I'm back. So here is this passage from Hillman's essay, James Hillman, who's a student of Carl Jung, called "Imagination is Bull," which if you can get a hold of it, it's a beautiful, beautiful essay. It comes from a volume of his teachings or his writings called, can't see it there, it's called Animal Presences. Anyway, this is called, he's talking about the bull and its relationship to imagination. He says, "Now to deliver on the last, America. Thomas Wolfe, the elder, not the one in the white suit, wrote that we are lost in America as if nostalgia were forever our mood. A stone, a leaf, an unfound door, a waste of loss, in the hot mazes, lost, among bright stars, we seek the great forgotten language, the lost lane end into heaven. What did we do wrong? Why have we been driven out? Was it crossing the oceans, leaving our ancestors behind? Is it that we have built our entire citadel on the illusions of hope? The city on the hill, a hill of sand? So many answers. Here is ours for this evening. Might it be that we have slain the mythical imagination of our own soil, the great founding beast, not the red Indian to whom our nostalgia often turns, but the native bison, the horned bull of this land? The hunters on horseback and later from train windows could shoot down thousands in one day, neither for meat nor for purse, leaving their carcasses to rot on the plains. The slaughter of the soil's totem is a blood crime, a pollution of the American soil, murder of the ancestral animal, a mythical genocide that made mythic perception no longer possible, a genocide backed by Hercules, Mithra, Gilgamesh, and the ancient struggle at the foot of Sinai, the Bible's word against the pagan bull. Could it be that the slaughter of our native bull, in which some Indians themselves have had their part, has been replicated in our heart, so that we Americans have extinguished and left to rot our native myth-making imaginal power that could found us? And so in quiet desperation to reconstitute this animistic imagination, we have conceived other originating myths for our people and our land with a substitute paganism, Walden Pond, leaves of grass, the white whale. Then in the bull's place, its fat ghost, the steer, dulled as an ox, no longer roaring its stories. Penned, corn-fed, testicles gone, the bull becomes chopped meat. Feasted upon obsessively, ritualistically, communally, no other remembrance of mythical power than the mechanical bull and the swagger and brag of the urban cowboy. Under the golden arches are contemporary altars to Mithra, a torabolium in ketchup. The dead gods are celebrated in strange, misshapen recurrences of antique rites. The burger's burger, a thick secular wafer in a debased myth that is liturgically living because we do not know it is a myth. A uniform daily observance of the native animal god with his and her epithet deorum, Burger King, Big Boy, Big Mac, Dairy Queen, Hamburger Heaven. I wanted to read that because what Hillman's getting at there is really important. The imagination and the drive, the imaginal and idealistic drive of Taurus is very important. The bull is a fecund animal, right? It's an image of potency and fertility, and it's a male animal. Even though we're talking about the animal kingdom in a sense generally as a feminine sign, earth, the feminine element, but we're still talking about a very masculine figure, which is a bull. And we're talking about a great power that comes with it, and a fear and a respect. This is why bulls were traditionally sacrificed. They were symbols of the power of heaven, but we might say also the power of imagination. And what Hillman is pointing to is that when we came here to the United States, right, we slaughtered the native bull of this land, which as a symbol in the psyche is very important, because we still need that symbol. And when we don't have a respect for it in nature, when it's not allowed a place to exist in nature as a powerful beast that we have real encounters with, then oftentimes what we try to do is drum up representations of that experience with such power and heaviness and gravity, like thunder and fertility and spring, like and the rain and the thunder and the pounding of the hoof on the earth that we feel when spring is in the middle and it's building. That's a power. It's not just apple pie. You know what I mean? It's not. So, but what happens when we're not in touch with that power? Then we get a really dark side of Taurus. And that is all of the substitutes that have become really divorced from that power. They've become, rather than bullish, rather than and filled with some kind of real potency, imaginally, spiritually, Taurus stripped from those things becomes about, rather than having a real relationship with a cow, we have hamburgers. Rather than having a real relationship with the power of a bull, we have cowboy culture. You know what I mean? And it's not, it's missing something. We're looking for something in Taurus that is about earthy power. Really think about the bulls of heaven in ancient mythology. The bulls were heavenly, often associated with thunder. So when you think about that kind of power behind Taurus, and you think about the fact that it's lacking, well, that's why people will, again, American culture will try to replicate that kind of power, but it will do so in terms of bullshit rather than actual imaginative, rich bull. So the bullshit that Hillman talks about as he's a play on words is, a culture that is obsessed with beauty, strength, virility, potency, and trying to also in Taurus make it look natural and simple. Like, well, I'm like, and I don't mean to rip on country music or people who live on the country or anything like that, but it's as a stereotype, as an American stereotype, like, well, I'm from Dallas and I like true American. And I'm like, this is kind of like, I'm an American and I like steak and I like Dallas Cowboys, and like that whole mentality of like, I like simple things, anything that's complex is throw it out, the dislike of complexity and a kind of nostalgic love of stuff that's just simple. Like, it's similar in the yoga world right now. Turn the culture to a different place. In the yoga world, I just like my simple organic food and my bare feet and, the feeling of like pranayama in the sunlight. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with any of this stuff. You know, I'm not against people wearing cowboy hats, listening to country music. I'm not against people enjoying the sunshine and you know, breathing exercises in Costa Rica or whatever. But anytime that when anytime that those things are done trying to mimic the fertile power of the bull, and they aren't filled with something that's authentically powerful, then they become what Hillman calls bullshit, which is that they become a way of attempting to get at the real power of spring, the imaginal, fecund power of spring, but they fall short, and so they fall into illusion, and they fall into nostalgia, but terrible nostalgia, right? They try to become, and let me tell you, by the way, too, having worked in the yoga industry for about a decade now, you know, it's amazing to me how spiritually centered people are when it comes to their yoga, right? That how spiritually centered they will sort of act. Like this is the heartbeat of my life. But if the yoga class, it has to start 10 minutes late, or if the next class is 10 minutes late, you know, we watch people completely lose their crap. Well, this was my relaxation hour. You know what I mean? So this is a problem for all of us in all time, not just right now. It's the problem of trying to feign some appearance of simplicity and beauty, when actually beneath it, there's a deep desire for power and strength. And right. So when you think of, for example, when you think of a lot of the images of people on yoga retreats in Costa Rica, like half naked, really nice bodies, doing really nice poses. And then there's a picture of them drinking wine under the sunset with like a group of people who are all there to really get spiritual or whatever. I'm mocking this. I don't mean to be a jerk, but when, because I've participated in that culture, it's not like I'm above it. We were all tempted by this, right? But when we get into that, what we're not showing to everybody is how blood hungry we are, right? How it's that same spirit of like, I want to be in control, and I want to be beautiful. I want to have and possess, and I want to make it look effortless and easy, like I'm not in possession of anything. I'm just laying here in the sun. So Hillman says that all of those are very like distorted attempts to get in touch with the power of imagination, or the power, or the real sort of power of the bull as a symbol. So this is some of the stuff. This is why Hitler has a ton of planets, you know, a lineup in Taurus that's very kind of dark. Well, I'd like to create the perfect golden race, the Aryan culture, right? It's just simple and it's easy. So anytime that someone starts talking about how simple and beautiful and carefree everything is, there's often, it's coming from Taurus, there's often a lot of control, a lot of hunger, a lot of thirst, a lot of power, and potentially blood. Remember that bulls as an animal are sacrificed, they're killed, and their blood is thought of as guaranteeing power and abundance, right? So it's this, you know, we don't think of that side of it because we tend to think of the feminine, the earthy, the Venusian, and the lunar. But the dark side of Venus is lust and jealousy. The dark side of the moon is illusion and getting lost in the past, nostalgia. And this is a fixed sign of Taurus, where the desire for things can become bullish. And if we don't have a healthy way of differentiating ourselves from the bull, of recognizing and honoring the power of the bull, which in my mind comes when we have some way of humbling ourselves and being thankful for that which is fecund, powerful, and bigger than us. But when we try to embody that ourselves and take it on and use it as a way of like, I'm the bull, aren't I so great? That's really the shadow side of Taurus. So I hope that this has been an interesting little, a little enlightening talk on the meaning of the sun in Taurus. I think one really good story to end with is the story of the Buddha, who is said to be born. It was either during Taurus season, if I remember correctly, under a Taurus full moon. I think it was this time of year, under the full moon, when the moon was when the sun was in Taurus in the springtime. But here's someone who was bullish about, he had opulence, wealth of a palace life, and then he sought enlightenment. This is a great archetypal story about how to seek the the power of that which is eternal, which is strong, which is powerful, which lives forever, that kind of myth of the all-powerful thunder bull. And the Buddha attains enlightenment eventually sitting under a Bodhi tree, and he taps his finger to the earth and says, the earth is my witness, when he's tested and asked, how can you prove that you've achieved enlightenment? There's something about his persistence and his desire to be in touch with an ideal spiritual position, coming out of the delusions of material opulence and that those things will ever satisfy us. That's also a Taurus story. And so don't forget about the ambitiousness of Taurus and the interesting way in which that ambitiousness and that desire for control can lie underneath the appearance of simplicity and great beauty. So as a Taurus rising, I feel like this struggle is like, it's like daily, it's so, at any rate, so that's the angle I wanted to take on the Taurus Sun today. I hope that this was, again, enlightening, give you something good to think about, and hopefully you like the passage from Hillman. He's always really interesting to listen to. So have a great new moon cycle in Taurus, and please tell me how it goes, and I look forward to being in touch again soon. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.